Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive is going to be a little different. We're going to be exploring just a single source, and it's a children's story.
Oh, wow.
Now, I know what you're thinking. What kind of deep insights could we possibly get from a children's story? But trust me, this charming narrative, it has some surprising things to say when it comes to sibling dynamics and starting school anxieties and even the power of storytelling.
You know what I think is so fascinating? It's that even though this is a story that's, written for kids, the themes are totally universal. I mean, we all, get those butterflies in our stomach before a big event, right? We all have those moments where we just feel like, things are out of control. And we all have those times where we need to step up and help somebody that we care about.
Yeah, and this story really captures that. So let's jump in. The story starts out with a scene that a lot of you are probably going to recognize, that back-to-school chaos. We meet Joe and Bella. These are siblings getting ready for, a big day. For Bella, it's her very first day of school ever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the story, it really captures that hectic morning energy.
Oh, yeah.
Parents are juggling work and trying to get everybody ready. The kids are feeling like a mix of excitement and nerves. You can almost feel the tension, coming off the page.
Right. And it doesn't shy away from the humor either. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like those little everyday moments. I actually chuckled when the dad yells out, "I'm late!" as he runs out the door.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I bet a lot of people listening right now can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely. It's that touch of realism that makes the characters feel so relatable right from the get-go.
Yeah. But underneath that humor, though, it also kind of hints at the pressures that families face.
Oh, yeah.
Deadlines, schedules, just the constant juggling act of life.
Okay, so Bella starts the day super excited about school. But when they get to the schoolyard, things kind of change. The noise and the older kids running around, it all just becomes way too much for her. And her excitement turns to fear pretty quickly.
This is such a great scene because it really shows how easily anticipation and reality can clash, especially for, little kids who are facing new environments.
Yeah.
And it underscores how important it is to have empathy, understanding a child's perspective.
Yeah, we often forget what it was like to be in their shoes.
Yeah.
To be facing all those firsts with those huge, big feelings.
Absolutely.
Now, her brother, Joe, he notices that Bella's having a meltdown. And he jumps into action. He doesn't just brush her fear aside. He tries to distract her with things he knows she loves, like her new pencil case.
Yeah.
And he promises her raisins later.
It's so simple, but it's so effective.
Yeah.
And this is where we start to see Joe developing theory of mind. He's beginning to understand that other people have their own thoughts and feelings, and they're different from his own. Yeah.
And then he uses that understanding to try to connect with her and help her.
That's a great point. He doesn't tell her to stop being scared.
Yeah.
He meets her where she is emotionally. And that's, something we could all learn from.
Oh, totally. And this is where the story takes kind of a whimsical turn. They go into the classroom and Bella meets her new teacher, Mrs. Wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And Bella's imagination just kind of takes over. She hears Wolf and she pictures this big, scary wolf standing in front of her.
Oh, gosh.
It's a classic example of how a child's imagination can just blend in with reality, especially when they're dealing with new and scary situations.
Yeah. I remember having fears like that as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Shadows would turn into monsters, and the creaking stairs, in our house at night would sound like the villain from a storybook. It's crazy how powerful our minds can be at that age.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder for us as adults to think about the language that we use around children.
And how they might interpret it. A name as simple as Mrs. Wolf can be really scary for a little kid with a big imagination.
Yeah, and Joe could have just dismissed Bella's fear, but he didn't. He actually tackles it head on. He points out that Mrs. Wolf doesn't have a tail, and then he asks this really insightful question. What if she's a good wolf?
That's such a crucial moment in the story because Joe doesn't try to just get rid of her fear.
Right.
He validates it, He says, maybe there is a wolf. But then he gives her another way to think about it.
Yeah.
He introduces this idea that things aren't always black and white, That even something that seems scary, like a wolf, can have different sides.
It's like he's introducing her to the idea of critical thinking without even realizing it.
Right.
Challenging assumptions, considering different perspectives, not just taking things at face value. That's pretty impressive for a young kid.
It really is. It's a lesson that I think we could all benefit from. How often do we just get stuck in our own assumptions and fears and we don't question them? or look for other ways of looking at things.
Yeah, we might be so busy worrying about the wolf right in front of us that we miss the possibility that maybe it's friendly, or even that it could help us.
Exactly. Joe's approach is such a good example of conflict resolution.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't dismiss her feelings, he listens to her, he engages with her fear, and then he gently kind of leads her towards a more balanced way of looking at it.
And he does it all with empathy and patience. It makes you wonder if this is something that just comes naturally to him, or is it something that he's learned by watching his parents, or maybe even from other stories?
That's a great question. It's probably a combination of things, you know? Kids are always watching and learning from what's happening around them. So Joe's behavior is probably influenced by the way his parents handle conflict and the stories he's heard, and even just his own personality.
Yeah, so whatever the reason, it's clear he's got some pretty impressive emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, in the end, Bella does seem to kind of accept Mrs. Wolf, but then there's this last scene where she whispers to Joe about how Mrs. Wolf is missing claws.
I know, that little detail is so powerful. Yeah. It shows how getting over your fears isn't just like flipping a switch.
Right.
Even when you figure out what you're scared of, those feelings can stick around. It takes time, you know? It's a process.
And it's so relatable.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've all felt that way as adults, too. Like, we understand that something isn't a threat anymore, but emotionally, we're still a little bit afraid.
Exactly. It shows how complex our emotions can be, and it reminds us to be patient with ourselves and with other people when we're dealing with those challenges.
And it reminds us that it's okay to not be okay all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we can have those anxieties and fears, but we don't have to let them take over.
Yeah, it's about figuring out how to deal with them.
Yeah.
Like, what are the things that work for us? Just like Joe. You know, he just naturally used distraction, and he changed the way she was thinking about the situation to help Bella. We can all find our own ways to handle those times when we feel scared.
So, based on what we've learned from the story, what are some of those tools? Like, what can we add to our own anxiety toolkit?
Well, the biggest thing is to remember how Joe was so good at having empathy and validating her feelings, you know?
Yeah.
When someone's telling you they're scared or anxious, even if it seems kind of silly to you, the best thing you can do is just acknowledge how they're feeling and let them know you understand. Dismissing those feelings or telling someone to just get over it, that can actually make things worse.
Yeah, it's like saying, hey, I get it. Your feelings are real, and I'm here to help you through this, instead of just saying there's nothing to be afraid of.
Right. And then we can also try using that reframing technique that Joe used. When we come up against a wolf in our own lives, whether it's like a deadline at work or a tough conversation we need to have, or even public speaking, we can try changing the way we think about it. Instead of just focusing on the negative stuff,
Right.
can we find something positive about it? Or maybe an opportunity to learn and grow.
So instead of thinking this presentation is going to be a total disaster, we can think, okay, this is my chance to share my ideas and connect with people.
Exactly. It's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's just about finding a way to see things in a more balanced and positive way. And sometimes, you know, a little bit of humor can help too.
Oh, yeah?
Remember how the dad yelling, "I'm late," kind of lightened the mood in that crazy morning scene?
Yeah, it's like it lets some of the pressure out and reminds us not to take everything so seriously.
Yeah.
Even when things are crazy and we're feeling anxious, there's always room for a little laugh, you know, to share a moment of lightness.
Exactly. Humor can be really powerful. It can help us relax and see things more clearly. And it can help the people around us do the same. It doesn't make the problems go away, but it helps us deal with them in a better way.
This has been such a cool deep dive. Who knew that a children's story could teach us so much about siblings and childhood fears, and even the power of storytelling?
Yeah, it reminds us that we can find wisdom in the most unexpected places. And sometimes those stories that seem simple or childish are the ones that have the most important messages.
So as you go about your day, we want you to keep this in mind. Look for those hidden lessons, those moments of insight in your own life. What seems ordinary at first glance might actually have a lot more to it if you really take the time to explore it.
And just like Bella learned that Mrs. Wolf wasn't just a scary wolf, but also a teacher, a person, we can all try to challenge our own assumptions and find new ways of seeing the wolf in our lives.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.